Welcome to PL Podcast with Greater Sudbury's poet Laureate Vera Constantineau.
Hi, it's Vera. Welcome to episode 4 of the PL Pod. This month has been filled with creative challenges, all in a good way. Online, specifically on Facebook, I posted one of my Senryu had been accepted by a journal, and that led to an exchange of snappy comments with fellow laureate Kim Fauner. Bottom line, she challenged me to write a triolet and a glossa. Truth, I had to look up the rules, because there will always be rules. Excuse me, the glossa has not made it all the way to its natural end. However, I feel I have a couple of decent triolet. The triolet is an 8-line poem with a specific repeating rhyme scheme. If you're interested in its intricacies after hearing mine, I suggest you look it up online and give it a try. If you write a triolet, please post it online, because the world needs more poetry right now. Also, if there's an expert in triolet out there who'd like to point out my flaws, feel free. I'm open to criticism. This is the first of my attempts. It's called Be Lifted. I am not short, nor am I tall. I can be lifted up to see. There is nothing missed, nothing at all. I am not short, nor am I tall. I've come this far and will not stall. I will grow wings and fly as me. I am not short, nor am I tall. I can be lifted up to see. There is a meaning to that poem, as with all poems, and if you've seen me, you know I'm physically short. It's often a challenge in itself to find the message the poet is trying to deliver in any poem, and I leave it up to you to find that one. The second triolet is called Young. Are you sensing a theme? No, there's no theme. When I was young, the world was huge, or so I thought. I read my books to dream of cities far away, so far away, the pyramids, the castles, the lot. When I was young, the world was huge, or so I thought. And now the world is a touch beyond for any vision sought. I have no need to leave my home today or any day. When I was young, the world was huge, or so I thought. I read my books to dream of cities far away. I hope you enjoyed those. They're light, but they do speak of something, which I think is important. American poet Billy Collins recently became part of James Patterson's masterclass stable. I know, excuse me. In the past, I signed up for Margaret Atwood's writing class, and the videos for new classes are often mailed to you to entice you to take another class. In Billy Collins' video presentation, he discusses the writing of poetry and reads selections of his poetry. He said 2 things during his video chats that fit with what I would like to say next. First, he said poetry is emotion. He's not alone in that statement. The online dictionary says much the same thing, and I quote, "Poetry is a type of literature or artistic writing that attempts to stir a reader's imagination or emotions." Second, Collins said poetry is not a story. I agree you are not telling a whole story. However, in former poet laureate Roger Nash's 2014 collection Upsy Doon, his poem Knitting relates a memory. He tells us of his grandmother's love of knitting. It's a lovely poem, and in its way is the entertaining story of how her love of knitting goes beyond her life, really. Many poems are memory-based, so although they're not telling a story, they are part of someone's story, life story. They seek to offer you the emotional experience within that poet's memory. A week or so ago, I was speaking with my friend and fellow writer Connie Sweet about different aspects of poetry, and she said, in her experience, reading poetry is consoling. I've been thinking about that word consoling, And I'd like to expand on Connie's experience of reading poetry being consoling and say that the writing of poetry for me has also been that way. Having spent time in hospitals for a variety of reasons, I know for me there is an intensity of thought during those times when I am in medical distress. And because your mind is occupied with your own troubles, you can't concentrate. You can't take in a novel. At least that's my experience. With poetry, though, the emotions we are feeling can often be mirrored back to us in the words of poets. That's why former Laureate Kim Fauner's idea of having stanzas of poetry etched on the windows at Health Sciences North in 2017 was such a great idea. She saw a need to offer a distraction, to mirror back emotions to patients, emotions that are almost a given when you're undergoing treatment or waiting for surgery. And perhaps they're even there to offer consolation and comfort through shared words with the families of those patients. Nothing is one-dimensional, even emotions. I think emotions are like the color wheel for artists. If it's one way to the light, it's the other way to the dark, and in between there's an array of shades of color, and therein lies emotion. Nothing is all black or white. In the last few years, I've had the opportunity to write far too many poems linked to grief, so much so that I've had to consciously reset my thinking. I try to look at poetry written in a time of grief as a tribute to the person I have in my heart. And it's healing to think of someone in ways that reminds us they were not always thought of as the lost or the late, but were people we loved and spent time with and had fun with. I know not everyone's experiences in life are the same, but we each experience emotions such as loss, grief, love, anger, happiness, frustration. The list goes on and on. In 2019, when my niece died, we were close, and her loss brought out all of the previously mentioned emotions, which resulted in a suite of poems that I tucked in a folder, and I may never share them. And that's okay. Those poems were written for me. I needed to say things like, I'll miss you and I love you one last time. No one else needs to hear it, but I needed to say it. And that's one of the things that poetry can give to you. It's almost like writing a letter of goodbye in this case, which can also be very healing. And I'm a big fan of finding balance in life. So for me, enduring a little bitter means seeking out a little sweet. I'd like to suggest you read my poem, The Last Laugh, written for my brother Gordon. It is in the 3rd issue of Terra North Nord, available on Greater Sudbury Library's website. I would read it to you, but even now, 14 years later, I find it too close, the grief. I would like to read you my poem, Those Two, written for my mother and her very close friend Oscar, who was like a grandfather to me. Taught me to swear, I'm sorry to say. Those Two. I placed their photo in a dollar store frame, nothing to hold them centered but their smiles. The frameless frame hung on the wall for almost a week before the two of them tilted somewhat awkwardly toward the corner. Typical of them, they spent a lot of time on tilt, awash with rye and water, a background score played by fiddle and accordion, accompanied by his shouts of, "Oh, yay, oh, yay," like a 40s big band leader. Their neighborly ways, their shared experiences, all meshed and moshed to give each something. Companionship, I guess. I was a kid on the fringes, left to watch the party swing and sway, and this photo shows the truth I never saw. She sits close with her arms crossed, a smile, but nothing showy. He leans slightly toward her, close but not too, and they are dressed for Sunday. And that would be Those Two. Again, my mother very influential in my life when it comes to poetry. I'd like to end this session with a haiku. This one from my new tiny chapbook called 3 Lines at a Time. Heavy rain, the constant clatter of Scrabble tiles. Thank you for listening to the PL podcast. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear or ideas that you'd like to put forth, please send them along to vera.constantineau@greatersudbury.ca. If I know about the subject you're inquiring about, I will talk about it. If it's unknown to me, I'll find someone who does know about it. So thank you. Goodbye. Get in touch and keep writing. It feels good.